Well, welcome back to the summit, everybody. I am sure you agree with me that our speakers are fabulous. They have been giving us so many in-depth tips, tools, strategies, and tactics that you can use to either start as a solopreneur or to grow your solo business into a large, I like to call it a gig hire, where you're getting multiple contracts and now you're hiring other people. Our next conversation is going to be around this whole concept of goal giving. And our speaker for today is Shira Harrington. She just got married, so I'm going to let her say her last name. But she has been a career coach for many years. She is the CEO of Purpose. For every hire, she says, there is a higher purpose. And she also runs an organization called Boomerworks, which helps mature people get into self-employment. Shira, welcome to the summit.
Thank you, Angela. It's such a delight and a blessing to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could join us.
Yeah.
So let's start by you sharing with us, how did you get an interest in this whole area of self-employment? Start by sharing your self-employment journey.
Absolutely. Well, it's sort of been an evolution since the beginning of my career. I came right out of college and I landed in a search firm, a recruiting agency. And, recruiting firms are really sales organizations, right? So you kind of eat what you kill. We're all sort of friendly competitors with each other within that situation. So I had to learn sales from a very early age. And I was with that firm, thankfully, very successfully for 15 years until it closed in 2009, right in the middle of the recession. And necessity being the mother of invention, I had to figure out, if nobody was recruiting at that point, right? Because who was hiring? I had to look to the other side, and I looked to the job seekers. And I said, you know what, if the employers can't really hire me to do recruiting, then maybe the job seekers need some help. And so I turned into a career coach. I layered that on top of my recruiting. And about a year later, I went solo. So went completely on my own. And I had both practices, recruiting and coaching. And I also layered on generational diversity work. And then who knew that I was going to love the coaching so much that I ended up helping people to become self-employed like me. And so I developed a passion for helping solopreneurs to launch and grow their own businesses. So have had a passion for many, many years around this.
Fabulous, fantastic. So you operate this concept that I think is very important for people to understand, because typically when you talk about starting a business or being a consultant or freelancer, everybody talks about the hustle and the grind and being a go-getter. And you talk about a concept of being a go-giver.
Yes.
Tell us what that means.
Yeah, so this concept of a go-giver, I did not make it up. Actually, there is a book, in fact, a book series around this concept by the very name. And it's by a couple of individuals, Bob Berg and John David Mann, if anybody wants to look it up. In fact, there's something called the Go-Giver Movement, so it's a thing. And I really have adopted this over the years because the idea behind being a go-giver is that the more you give, the more you have. Now, let me be clear about this. You don't give in order to have. You give for the sake of creating value, and then the more will come back to you, right? So it's really about an attitude, if you will, of the heart, of the mind, of your heart set toward other people. So often, and you just mentioned this a minute ago, it's all about the go-getter, go get things, or if you will, in the opposite of a go-giver, go-taking, right? You've met people, I think, and we all have, who are so very much into the hustle that they forget who they're serving, right? And I feel like that's even the tagline of my business, right? For every hire, there's a higher purpose. What is your higher purpose? Whether you are a W-2 employee or a 1099er, or you have a thriving small business, I believe we're all here to serve. We're here to help somebody else solve their challenges, solve their problems. And it's not about us, right? We have gifts, we have talents, we have thought leadership, we have all kinds of services that we can offer. But the attitude with which we approach that, people will feel that from us. Right? You know what that's like when you sit down for a networking coffee with someone, Angela, and the first thing they do is start telling you about themselves. right? It's like me, and what can I do, and what, and they hardly ever ask you a question about yourself. Well, a go giver is the opposite. In fact, I know that I'm sitting with a fellow go giver when they can't go quickly enough to ask me about myself. I'm like, wow, this is a go giver. I know it immediately. I can sense it. And it almost to the point where I have to force myself back in the conversation. No, tell me about you. And so that mindset, whether you are adopting it with networking, which we'll talk about in a little bit, certainly with your prospecting, with your thought leadership, it's all about how can you create unparalleled value for the people that you serve.
Okay, so tell me a little more concrete exactly what you're talking about,
Yeah,
because
sure.
you're not talking about giving away all of your services and products
No.
for free. What exactly do you mean that we are to be go givers? What are we
Yeah.
giving?
Yeah, sure. So there are a lot of ways to be a go-giver, right? There's no one way to do this concept. And when I say providing value, in fact, I actually, before I even go into answer your question, I'll mention that there are 5 areas that these 2 authors talk about in their go-giverness, and that is creating value, touching lives, building networks, being real, and staying open. Okay. And so I'm just going to touch a little bit on these kinds of concepts. And when we talk about providing value, you're absolutely right. It's not necessarily giving everything away, although it's actually giving something away. In fact, even in your GigCon, right, in this very forum, all of us speakers are trying to give something of ourselves to help and to serve the audience that we're speaking to, because we know that they could benefit from a little bit of the wisdom that maybe we picked up along the way, right? We're giving this all away complimentarily because we care, right? We're not doing this to build our businesses. We're doing this because we really believe that people can be helped along the way. So sometimes it is giving away a little bit, sometimes a lot of your thought leadership. Sometimes it's about connecting, right? Have you ever had somebody, Angela, who calls you, a colleague, let's say, and they'll say, hey, Angela, do you know of somebody who does X, right? And the first thing you do, because I know you're a connector like I am, he's like, oh yes, call so and so, right? You build a network around you of people who can provide value even beyond what you can provide, and so you're making these thoughtful connections. Sometimes it's about convening groups. I happen to be a convener myself, and I love bringing people together in networking opportunities where people can kind of help each other, provide value for each other. So my own value is not even offering the value, it's providing the space for the value to be created. Sometimes it's about speaking, right? Public speaking, and even for free, right? Where you can go to a local chapter or a local organization and give away some of your knowledge to help people and inspire them to be better at what they're doing.
So it really is about a mindset. It's
Yeah,
not really about what you're actually giving, the
right.
gift that you're giving. It is really offering yourself with the right kind of mindset
That's
toward
exactly
your
right.
customers, the people around you,
That's right.
right?
That's absolutely right. Because people can feel when you are all about you, right? Have you ever felt that? We can
Oh
feel
yeah,
that.
you can
We
feel that. You
we
can.
can we can people can smell that. There's an old expression, you know it, I'm sure many people on this call know it, and that is people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And the trust factor is actually what we're talking about here. It's a sense of being authentic. It's really giving for the sake of giving. People know that when you are about them and you're not about yourself. I had it happen once where I was facilitating a networking group. I happened to most of my business is actually in the sector of the nonprofit world, specifically associations. And so I've convened an association CEO roundtable for many years. And I remember talking to one of my participants, longtime participants, who ended up hiring me. And so after this group, we ended up doing business together years later. And she said, Shira, she said, the reason why I ended up working with you, she says, because every time you facilitated those groups, you were really just there to serve us. She says, you were never selling anything. You never doing this for the sake of your own business. You were just sort of there in the shadows and you helped facilitate our conversation. She said, I really respected that. And she said, and that made me trust you. That made me trust your intentions, that your intentions were there for service and they were not there for just making money. And I feel you're right, Angela. It is a mindset, right? And also I would say a heart set, if you will,
Yeah.
where people can feel it. They really can. It's not even about what you're saying. Sometimes it's about what you're not saying. And that's, I think, the thing that we need to remember.
So, what I guess I would say to the people who are watching this broadcast is this is not a tactic. This is not
Correct.
something that you now say, okay, I am going to develop a strategy to be seen as a go giver. It truly is something in your heart
Yes.
because this concept is not new.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the rapport building in a sales cycle. And if it's not authentic, then it still comes across as a used car
That's
salesperson.
right. That's right.
Sorry, car salespeople, to pick on you guys, but it really is like changing the way you think about maybe people in your networks and potential customers and all of that. It's like coming from a place of truly in your heart wanting to help people and to serve people.
You know, Angela, there's a famous quote. It's often attributed to Teddy Roosevelt. Who knows who actually said it, but I love it. And it says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about. It's about being genuine. It's about being authentic. And people know when you are being that way, when you're doing it for the sake of the other person. It's almost having an others-oriented mindset. And one of the ways to do that actually is to walk a mile in your prospect's shoes. What is actually keeping them up at night? Become a master at understanding the challenges that are facing your prospects and your clients, and brainstorming solutions with them, right? Because if you become a thought partner with them, not just a service provider, they're going to really trust you as someone who's there to help them, who's there to help them through thick and thin, where they can call you out of the blue and say, hey, can I brainstorm this problem with you? And you're not going to nickel and dime them for every 6 minutes of the call, right? So they're going to get that. And there are ways to do that with your prospects, but also may I emphasize here with your alliance partners. I'm not sure how much others have talked about this, but I love this idea of alliance partnership, which is where you find other consultants who serve a very similar market that you do. Sometimes you could be overlapping, sometimes not. I call it the difference between a sibling versus a first cousin, right? Where you are partnering with this person lightly or heavily, and you're trying to figure out ways that together you can serve this community. So again, just to bring up the community I happen to serve in the association world, association consultants sort of know that we are here to help associations navigate the huge disruptions that they are currently facing. I won't go into the detail of what those are, but basically every industry is being disrupted on some level. Associations are not no exception. And so oftentimes we'll get together and we'll think, we'll thought partner with each other. How can we help? What can we do? One time I partnered years ago, I partnered with an association consultant. We put on a CEO conference just for the sake of helping these association CEOs to understand best practices and next practices within the sector. And so there's all kinds of creative ways you can do this. And may I also suggest that when you're thinking about alliance partnerships, you want to adopt what some people call a co-opetition mindset, or some people call it competimates, where you meet somebody else who does something very, very similar to what you do, maybe even exactly what you do. And you overlap with them, and for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes it's because they have an expertise that you don't have, so you can bring them in on an assignment that you have. Sometimes the project is frankly just too big, and the two of you need to come together. And sometimes you just really need somebody who can support you, because you know what, your workload is really just very, very stretched. And you know what, and sometimes it's just a matter of encouragement. You might create an alliance partner group, maybe even a mastermind group, where several of you come together on a regular basis and you're helping each other for free, right? You're just sitting around the table and you're brainstorming ideas, talking about your clients and what their challenges are. Maybe somebody has a really interesting solution that you can pass along to a client, right? There are lots of different ways that this can manifest, Angela, but as you so rightly said, it is a mindset, it is a heart set, it is a way of being with your community, of fellow consultants and prospective clients, and then all of a sudden the creative ways that that can manifest suddenly appear if you're really authentic about helping.
Now, I think you might have already gotten into some of this, but I want to get a little more specific about what does this look like in
Sure,
action.
sure.
So let's just talk about the whole networking piece because a
Yeah,
lot of consultants, freelancers, solopreneurs
yeah, yeah,
the value
yeah,
of networking.
yeah.
What does this go-giving heart set look like in that kind of environment?
Sure. Well, first of all, networking, as you know, can take on a lot of different forms. I think when most people think of it, they think of, showing up to a local chapter of the National Association of Widget Makers, right? And that absolutely can be, right? Where you're in a networking reception and you got your celery and hummus on the one hand and your drink on the other, and you're kind of trying to network. And that is absolutely one way. But there are so many different ways to do this. And really, again, thinking about the mindset, whether you are actually physically at a networking event, whether you are actually sitting down face to face with somebody, or whether you are giving away your thought leadership in a public speaking or in a digital platform, any which way you do it, you want to be making sure that you again are focused on the what's in it for the other person. What's in it for the other person? What are they going to get out of how is their life going to be enhanced by me being in it? How will they benefit from it? So for example, I'll give some quick examples, very practically speaking. I'll tick off my fingers. So let's just say you are in a networking event. Okay. Now this networking event, and we know there are different kinds. Sometimes it'll be a networking event that's within what I call your tribe. So for example, maybe it's in the industry that you work in, or maybe you're networking with people who do what you do. For example, you're a public relations professional and you are now in a networking chapter of PRSA, the Public Relations Society of America. Or maybe you are a healthcare consultant and now you found a group where healthcare professionals hang out. Whatever the situation is, you're standing there and you're networking with somebody. That person could be a prospect, that person could be a potential alliance partner, or maybe nothing necessarily to you, but they're a person and they have needs. So one of the very first things that you need to do when you shake their hand is ask them about themselves. Do not start with you, start with them. People love to tell their story. Everybody's got a story, and you can start really quickly. Well, the kind of the what got you here. Hey, we're both in this place here. Tell me what brought you here. Tell me what you're learning from being with this organization. What's keeping you up at right now? Tell me what you do. Ask questions. Be inquisitive. Care. Ask follow-up questions. This isn't just the gratuitous, I'm asking you something just because I want to show you that I'm a go-giver. You actually need to be a go-giver. You need to ask the question and follow up and show interest, and your body language needs to express it. You need to have, kind of that curious, open mindset, right? So when you're talking to somebody, they're going to get that you really care about what's important to them. Number one. Number two, because everybody does, when they start sharing what some of their challenges are, that's where you can be a connector. And you be, oh, wait, you just mentioned that you've got this challenge. I know somebody. I've met somebody. You know what, actually, Angela? I met this person 10 minutes ago on the other side of the room. Let me walk you over and introduce you to them so that the two of you can have a synergistic conversation. That's what I'm talking about, right? Where you're going out of your way to make somebody else's life better, because all you're doing is you're being a facilitator between them and the possible solution. And the solution could be an idea. The solution could be another person. The solution might be you, but maybe it's not you, right? Doesn't always have to be you. It takes a lot of gifts and talents to make the world go around. So that's the first thing I would say about networking. Secondly, I would talk about convening. So I touched on this a few minutes ago, but I'll be a little bit more specific. We all know that we're in a day and age where digital sort of supposedly runs the world. But we also know that people are craving face-to-face interaction. Even just the fact that we're doing this Zoom call, right? We're connecting, we're not physically in the same room, right? But we're seeing each other, and there's more of a connection than if we were on the phone or if we were just, on social media. And that's important. People want to connect with you. And one of the ways that they like to do this is with fellow professionals in their field. And especially if you are a consultant or if you're someone who's servicing a particular community, you have a unique opportunity to convene a group of professionals to create a peer roundtable, a discussion for free. I am not even talking about monetizing. Yes, there is a way to monetize this. I've seen that happen successfully, but just for the sake of our conversation, I'm going to keep this with the free model, where you pull people together some sort of regular basis, could be monthly, could be quarterly, whatever works for you, and you facilitate a thought leadership, a deep conversation, so that these professionals can connect with each other. And if you know anything about their industry or you know anything about their profession, you might be able to hopefully facilitate that conversation, maybe even put a pebble in the pond, and add a little bit of your own wisdom to the but it's not about you, right? You're almost a little bit in the shadows. And so people feel like they have a safe space to convene, that they will thank you and they'll be very, very grateful that you brought them together. And I will tell you, some of my most wonderful moments in my life of convening is when I watch an interaction happen between two professionals or two executives, and one's helping the other and one's giving the other a resource, and they're writing, oh, who was that? I mean, my little connector heart goes a flutter, flutter. I cannot tell you how much joy I get out of that, because they would not have been able to have that kind of rich interaction had they not been brought together, right? So it's really about seeing the fruit out of those relationships. And then the third thing that I'll mention has to do with speaking. You know, not everybody's a public speaker. I get that. We all have different gifts. Some people actually like to express their thought leadership in writing, and both are absolutely valid. But let's just say you do have a gift for that kind of communication. So many local organizations, specifically chapters of associations, of membership organizations, are looking for people to share, to educate their audience, not sell, but educate their audience on some aspect of their profession or the industry, some challenge that group is dealing with, that you might be able to shed some insight on. And if that happens to be your gifting, I would highly encourage you to consider offering that. But again, if it's not, thought leadership in the digital space, blogging, writing articles, responding to other people's posts on LinkedIn and Twitter and what have you, you could actually even find one of those associations. They often have newsletters, they have magazines, they have publications where they're trying to serve their community, and they're looking for good writers, right? They're looking for people who are going to add a bit of wisdom, a bit of insight. So Angela, hopefully that gives your audience some practical tips for networking.
Yeah, that was great. That was absolutely great. And you kind of mentioned this whole concept of thought leadership, which we do talk about on another segment, but that is becoming known as an expert in your area of wisdom, so that when people are looking for someone who does X, Y, Z,
that's right.
Your name is put forward, your name comes up in search engines, your name is bantered about as a possibility.
Yes.
Are there any other tips that you can provide around the whole thought leadership piece?
Yeah, I think that one of the things about thought leadership is really trying to become a pioneer in your field of expertise. Because thought leadership, yes, could be repurposing other people's content. I mean, it happens all the time, right? Nothing new under the sun. It could be having some interesting ideas. But when you can actually go ahead of the curve, have some foresight, maybe not necessarily be a futurist, but almost in that direction, and peer into the future and say, I wonder what's coming around the corner. And you start doing some dot connecting. You're going to be seen as not only somebody who understands your profession, your field, your industry, but somebody who's really an expert, where other people are going to come to you and say, what's happening here? What do you think? Almost being a bit of a disruptor, a thought leader disruptor, where you're questioning current wisdom, and that takes a little bit of guts, and it takes a lot of insight. But if you can kind of look at the way things are currently done and say, wait, this isn't working. I'm seeing something else coming around the corner. We need to think about this differently. I'll give you a personal example. So I mentioned when I started my 30-second intro that I started out and am still a recruiter. Okay. Now in the land of recruiting, we are taught basically two things: find candidates who are skilled at what they do, meaning they can do the job. And number two, that they'll be a good culture fit. And Angela, nothing wrong with those two things, right? Don't you want to hire somebody who can do the job and someone you're going to like working with? No problem with that at all. But once I became a coach, a career coach, suddenly my mindset shifted. And I suddenly realized there was a missing piece. And the missing piece is that very often in these recruiting and interviewing conversations, we forget to ask the candidate one very important question. What do you want to do? We recruiters forget to ask that question. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up repurposing a thought leadership concept that I use in my career coaching work, which I call passiontivity, and it looks at a person's skills and career motivators. And then I repurposed it into recruiting, and I repurposed it into my interviewing. And so now I start all of my interviews with that question. What do you want to do? What are the skills that you are great at, that you love to do? What do you want to do more of? What do you want to do less of? Does this actually align with the job that you're actually applying for? And so I took this whole idea of thought leadership, and now what I do is, and the reason why I told you this story, is because when I am engaging with other recruiters, with other HR professionals, other executives, I say, hey, when you're doing your interviewing, not by using me as a recruiter, when you're doing your interviewing on your own, adopt this concept, what I like to call higher engagement, HIRE, sorry, higher engagement. You're hiring people who are engaged on the outside. Then you're going to have a highly engaged workforce, and people are going to be working with purpose. So that's one of the ways that I've allowed my thought leadership and sort of a pioneering philosophy to come forth. So I use it in my own life, and then I share it with other people, regardless of whether they work with me. I just want to kind of spread the wealth, if you will, the wisdom wealth, and let people have a concept here that they can use to help themselves in their own business.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. And that thinking ahead and almost being a futurist is very well real, and it can be like, some interesting ground to stand on, because the status quo will definitely push back in a lot of instances. So you
Yes,
have to really be prepared
that's right.
for that and know your stuff, have a firm
And
foundation.
if I may say, Angela, you have to have a little bit of gumption, and you have to have a little bit of a thick skin, because you're right, the status quo will push back, and especially if you're putting your thoughts on paper or online, if you will, um, people are going to comment. And you want to also, something else is very important here with thought leadership, is you want to try to remove what I'll call the snarky factor. Okay, because we are in a day and age where where conversations can get a little bit edgy, a little bit sarcastic, a little bit jaded almost. And you want to make sure that if you are sharing a thought leadership concept that's a little bit pioneering, that you do it with compassion, because people are doing what they do because that's all they know to do. If you happen to have a revelation, piece of insight that shows the world, you know what, this could be done differently, walk a mile in their shoes first. Appreciate why this may be the current course of action, why people have what you might call legacy thinking about something. And then as you're sharing your thought leadership, do it with a sense of compassion and grace. Respect where they're coming from before you offer your advice. And as you do that, people will feel calmer. They'll feel more trusting of you. Like, okay, she's not trying to make me wrong, not trying to judge me, right? She understands why I'm doing what I'm doing. And in fact, I understand, for example, in my recruiting example, I get it. I understand that employers are all they're disrupted. They have to move a mile a minute, and they need people who are going to be productive. So of course, the natural tendency is, can you do this job, and are we going to like working with you? But it's just giving them a little bit of extra insight to round out the picture that there's something else that they may want to consider, right? So it's all about that mindset, all about that heart set. It's how it's not, they say it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And this is very, very important when people are thinking about being a thought leader. How are you communicating the message? Are you communicating it with compassion? Are you walking a mile in your reader's or your listener's shoes and saying, I've been there, I understand it. And you know what? Here's another piece of insight that might help you along your journey.
Good stuff. Good stuff, Shira. All right. So as we begin to round this out, if you have any parting thoughts, tips, tools, strategies you want to share, that would be fabulous.
Yeah. So One of the things, one of the tips that I think I'd like to share with people, and I hadn't mentioned this yet, but I think it's really helpful when you're thinking about how do you find the people with whom you want to network and with whom you want to be a go-giver. There's a concept called fishing where the fish are. And in order to fish where the fish are, you need to know what kind of fish you are and the kind of fish that you want to swim with. And it's very, very important to be very focused on that. A lot of times consultants will have almost too broad of a pond, right, where they're sort of trying to serve everybody in all ways. And I wanted to, encourage your listeners to be thinking about finding the groups of people, if you will, the school of fish, where your fish are swimming, where your clients are swimming, where your alliance partners are swimming. So whatever industry you serve or whatever profession you're in, you want to make sure that you are surrounding yourself with the people who can hear what you're saying. We're going to appreciate when you're being a go-giver. You need to be able to give something to somebody in a meaningful way. If you're networking with people who are completely outside of your field of interest or your expertise, you might be a wonderful go-giver, but you don't really have much to give them because they don't really relate to what you're offering. And so that's why it's really important to narrow in, to niche yourself where you can. Whether it's, let's say you're in the nonprofit world like I am, or you're in the financial services world, or healthcare, or government contract. I mean, there are a million different industries out there. Make sure that you find where your fish are online, the groups that they meet with, the chapters that they go to, what are they reading, who are they connecting with. Immerse yourself in that pond. Learn the temperature of the water, if you will, right? Learn the way that they swim and kind of be among them so that when the time comes for you to offer something, they're going to be able to receive what you have to share.
Sounds great. So you heard it from an expert. Go out there and be a go-giver. So guys, thank you, Shira, so
My
much for
pleasure.
joining us. And I'm going to encourage you to stay tuned because we have many, many, many more experts who are sharing on all types of broad topics and getting very narrow in their suggestions on things you can do to become more effective, efficient, wiser, and more profitable as a self employed professional. Stay tuned. Thanks.